next 60 minutes, I'm going to show you how to go from zero to hero in React. So if you've never heard of React, or if you've heard of React and you've always wondered how to use React to build modern user interfaces, modern web applications, well, this is your opportunity. This mini course is actually part of a larger course which I've launched just a few hours ago. And if you're interested in diving deeper into React.js, then I invite you to find the link in the description and go check out the course. But nonetheless, here's the course where I'm going to show you in 1 hour what's React it's all about, and I hope you enjoy it. Okay, so now let's go ahead and start looking at React.js and web development in general, essentially an overview so you can see the motivation behind React.js. When it comes to building web applications, we have what we call the old approach versus the new approach, which in this case includes React. So let's go ahead and dive right into understanding the old approach of building web applications. So traditionally, websites are built using HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. So all of that would be in the server, in this case in the back end. So the idea would be we then have the client, which is the front end. So the client, this is where users would, for instance, go to the browser and click a button on a website where they're doing something, right? So the interaction would be very simple. The front end is where the client users would have access to a web page through a browser, and then the browser, of course, is the middleman between the client, the front end, and the server, the back end. Okay, so the idea was that the server would then render the entire web page, which then would be served to the client through the web browser. Now, this sounds good and everything. Now, the thing here is that each interaction typically required a round trip to the server to fetch a new HTML page, rendering, in this case, the entire page again, even if only a part of the page had changed. Okay, so as you can see, this process could be slow and very inefficient, especially for complex applications. So as web applications grew more dynamically and interactive, this approach, of course, struggled to maintain smooth user experience and efficient data updates. Very expensive, meaning it's just very inefficient for the reasons that I've just discussed. So essentially, in the first request, so we have the client, which is the front end, and then the server, which is the back end. When a user requests something, we have the HTML, CSS, and everything. And in the back end, we have what we call the views, data layers, and service layers, and all of that great stuff. So what happens now is that the request that is sent from the front end by the user is returned again by rendering the web page. So all of the HTML, CSS, JS, all of that is returned when the request is sent as a response. So again, this requires a refresh of the entire page, which can, of course, cause a problem like flash white. And for that reason, your website can be slow and also can drive users away from the website because you have to wait until the redrawing is complete of the entire web page. In this case here, if there is a post request, for instance, the same thing would happen. The rendered page will happen again, everything CSS, HTML, JavaScript, plus reload of the entire page. So each request is equal to page reload. So not good. Now, the newer approach is a little bit different. With the newer approach, we have what we call SPA. Now, you don't have to understand exactly what all of this is, but the idea is very simple. SPA stands for single page applications. The idea is that we have this illusion where we only have a single page where users can just go to one page and interact with that page, and that page will refresh only the parts that needs refreshing to serve the user. We have the same thing. We have the client front end and we have the server in the back end. But now things are a little bit different because the request is sent to the server or the back end. We still have HTML, CSS, JavaScript, but the back end now has a different responsibility in so many ways. It is responsible for doing, for instance, authentication, authorization, validation, and so forth. Now, we don't have to understand all of that. It's okay, just to give you an overview, okay? the way this works is as follows. So in the initial page load, what would happen is that the server sends the minimal HTML, CSS, and JavaScript required to render the application, doesn't send everything. So this typically includes the structural markup, styles, scripts to handle further interactions and data fetching. Now, the beauty here is that as the user continues to interact with the application, JavaScript handles the browser events and fetches data asynchronously using AJAX calls or newer APIs like Fetch and so forth. So this data is actually used to dynamically update the web page's content by manipulating the DOM, so the HTML behind everything, directly in the browser. So this is way better than what we had before. Unlike the traditional websites where a new page request had to trigger a server response with new HTML, when we have this new structure, this new way of building web applications, as you can see, the advantages now is that we no longer have this whole payload of HTML, CSS, JS that is sent each time that a user is requesting something to the server. Okay, so now we only get the pieces, in this case the client and the front end. It's responsible for getting the front end gets the pieces that it needs to render, to show to the user, as opposed to re-render everything, which is less expensive, meaning it's very efficient as opposed to the old approach of building web applications. So when we talk about building web apps using this new paradigm, single page applications, you see that we have this symbiotic relationship between the back end and the front end. But at the center of everything, we have the data. So there's data handling that needs to happen, as well as the data displaying, which needs to happen in response to the data or the state. We'll talk more about that. Now, you will say, okay, when we talk about data and front end and displaying data, getting things from the back end and showing to the users, but make sure that we're not rendering everything, even the unnecessary things that needs to be rendered for efficiency. You can say, well, that is something that is trivial to do because we're talking about data and UI needing to stay in sync. Well, this is actually not easy to do. It's a hard problem to solve, actually. And let's go ahead and see why this is a hard problem to solve. So let's continue here and tell you exactly why this UI and data syncing of data, it's actually really hard, and the solutions that have come about as of late. If you look at this website, this is a screenshot that I got from Expedia. So the idea of Expedia, as you may know, is that you want to be able to go and look for flights, look for places to stay, for vacation, and so forth. Now, looking at this page here, you can realize that there's a lot of things that are happening. Okay, and I'm going to show you how data intensive this is. So you can see at the top here, we have a form, an input form, where it allows users to enter where they're going to. And then we have, yes, the checkout form, travelers, how many people are traveling with you, their check-in. And then we have this search button. When clicked, something happens, right? To search and everything. Then at the bottom here, you notice that all of this is also part of the user interface, which then we can subdivide into other parts. In this case, the filter by, you can filter by neighborhood where you want to stay. And then we have where everything has been shown here. Now, all of this is driven by data, of course, right? The top part of the data is what we enter, where we're going to, and the checkout, travels, and so forth. And so when you do this, when you go to a website like this, you notice that you don't have to go to a different page when you're searching with things. Usually everything is populated on this page. So everything here is data being passed around. Okay, from the moment that you add the place you're going to, and then check out dates, how many people are traveling, check in, and so forth. That is all data. So in this case, as you know, the UI needs to be refreshed, but not only refreshed, it also needs to be in sync with the data that we're passing in. Because we pass, say, I want to check out May 10th and hit search, that will change, will drive everything that you see here that's been shown. Okay, so this data has to be in sync so that the correct information is shown at a certain period of time. Now you realize right away that this is a very complex problem, because how do you keep the data afloat? How do you keep this data in sync? Traditionally, you would use JavaScript to build something like this, which is very possible. But you can realize then, for a complex project, this is almost impossible to deal with, because if you're just using JavaScript directly, vanilla JavaScript as they call it, then you will end up with a lot of different pieces of data that have to be passed around to respond to X, Y, and Z, then to show something else, and then to take that data and do something else. And so it becomes a mess. The way to solve this nightmare, right? Things have to be broken down into what we call data state. So now we look at this same diagram, this same picture, the same screenshot here. We look at all of these pieces as data, as state, meaning all of this now we call them state being passed around, which essentially is data, but now is a state, because the state will allow for the reactiveness of the website. Meaning, if something changes here, then we click search, this whole page has to change right away. So there's this sense of the data state that was changed, that it needs to be triggered to change what needs to change so that we can serve the correct information to the user. Okay, so in this case here, the UI needs to be in sync with the data. In this case, data is equal to state, because each piece of data is called a state in web development in this case here, because it is what is used to change the state of the user interface, whether to show X or Z, etc. Again, it would be virtually impossible to try and brute force keeping this amount of state, amount of data in sync using the traditional straight JavaScript, vanilla JavaScript, because this is too complex of a website. So we would not, nor should we build such infrastructure using the old tools, again, like vanilla JavaScript alone. You may say, okay, what is this? What are you talking about? Why wouldn't I want to build with vanilla JavaScript, just straight vanilla? Well, again, it's too much. You don't want to do this. Just no, don't use vanilla JavaScript to do this, because you are going to be very unhappy. As an overview, what does that mean when you say, okay, build with vanilla JavaScript? Well, first of all, we have to understand this concept of DOM, which is Document Object Model. So essentially, a DOM is an object that allows us to access each element in our web page. So in this case here, we would have lots of direct DOM manipulation and traversing, which means each time we want to change the state of a certain part of that website, then we have to go into the actual DOM, for instance, the body, and go into the p tag and do all things and get that state. So manipulating directly the DOM, which is time intensive, but also very expensive, inefficient, which of course will lead to hard to maintain code. Of course, in this also, the data, in this case, state, is coupled with the DOM. So there's no separation, meaning if you were to directly manipulate the DOM to create the structure I showed you the previous website, then the state and the data and the code is going to be all together. So there's no separation, which means that will lead to lots of bugs and very confusing for all of other developers who may be working on this project with you. And yourself as well. You'll be very confused because everything is all over the place. Now, the question is, okay, what is the solution then if we shouldn't be using JavaScript vanilla straight to create complex web applications that have to maintain the UI and the data in sync? What is the solution to that? Well, the solution to that is to use a framework. Okay, so in this case, we're going to be using React. Now, React is not actually a framework, it's more of a library. So essentially, React is a library because it does one thing really well. A framework is a little bit more complex because it's more of a toolbox, whereas a library is just one tool. Okay, so some people call it framework, other people call, but essentially, a React is not a framework, is indeed a library. Okay, so with React now, the main thing is that it handles all of the data, the state, and everything. So we don't have to do that manually. It also keeps UI and data in sync, which is the main point of why we wouldn't want to use vanilla JavaScript to get this to work. All of that is actually taken care of by React. And also, developers will only focus on data and building the UI. They wouldn't have to figure out, okay, how do I keep the state? How do I make sure that the state is actually reactive, and how to make sure that things are working? Nope. All developers have to focus on is on data, which is the main piece that's very important. And of course, build the user interface. Okay. And most importantly as well is that this is a structured way of writing code, writing better code, because we'll enforce that thinking using this solution, using React, okay, which is to enforce a structured way of writing code. In turn, gives us a structured and consistent way of building front-end applications. Because now, instead of having all of this complexity that we adding using just vanilla JavaScript to build complex applications, because we need to make sure that we have the data, which is the state, and that state has to react to make sure that the user interface changes accordingly, and all of that mechanics, we don't have to worry about that, right? Now we have a structured and consistent way of building front-end applications using a tool, in this case a library, which is React. Now, the main thing here you have to keep in mind, and we'll keep talking more and more about as we keep going, is that the basics here is that we have the data and we have the user interface. So these two have to be in sync for this to work. That is the whole point of React. Okay, so abstracts out, which means you don't have to worry about the underlying workings on how this data is actually data. When I say data, I'm talking about state as well, how all of that is being synced together. All we have to do is just use React, and that is already done by the tool. And that will allow us to build very complex applications such as the screenshot I was showing you earlier, because now the data and UI is in sync, and all of that is done by React. Now that we know the advantages to using React versus JavaScript, vanilla JavaScript, to build complex applications that allow us to sync the UI and the data, let's look at what is this React thing. Even though we've defined a little bit, but let's go deeper and understand what is it and how all that works. So React.js, what is it? React.js, or simply called React, is a popular open source JavaScript library for building user interfaces, right? So essentially it allows us to build single applications where you need a fast and interactive user experience. And if you want a little bit of history, React was actually created by Facebook and was first released in 2013. So the beauty of React is that it allows developers to create large web applications that can change data state, right, without reloading the page. Now, this is very important for the reasons that we've discussed previously. Now, its main goal is to be fast, scalable, and simple to use. So it works only on user interfaces and applications. So this is the same as the view in the model view controller template. So it can be used with a variety of other libraries or frameworks in the model view controller, such as AngularJS and in terms of workflow. So React is declarative as well as component-based framework or library in this case. But what does that mean? Well, declarative means, really simply put, that it defines what the UI should do, not how to do it. That is a very important distinction from the imperative way of declaring, the imperative way of building applications. In React, we just say, hey, this is what we want the user interface to do. And then you figure out how that is done. And that is part of the abstraction I was talking about here. So we don't have to think about how things are done to get X, Y, and Z. We just define what the UI should do. Now, this is beautiful because we are not manually manipulating the DOM or directly handling events. So the system, in this case of React, the React library itself, will take care of interpreting this state and making the necessary changes to be displayed for the user to see. Now, the component-based side of things, as you will see, React as a building block, it builds upon its smaller pieces of UI that we can actually create that will then be put together on the page. So essentially, as you can see here, if you look at this would be representative of a page. And these are small pieces of user interface that are defined, as you will see later, as functions, Okay, we'll see they're called components. And these are small pieces that can then be reused anywhere else we want. And we'll see all of that. Okay, so that is the beauty. So we have these small pieces of code that do something, to create something, the user interface and so forth, and we can reuse those components. So that's why it's component based. And it's a very powerful concept, as we will see in this course. So looking at the component based part of thing, so again, you can see at the top here, we still have this same diagram. So each part that we see that is underlined, it is indeed a component. So you can see here, this could be one component. Actually, this whole top could be one big component, which then we subdivide into smaller different components. So this could be its own component. This could be its own component. A button could be its own component. And this whole area could be its own component, which would include other pieces that would be their own components. Actually, in this case here, each one of these rows could also be their own components, which probably is the best way to do this, which is part of this bigger component. And even within these smaller components here for each row, we could have this image carousel here as its component, this top part as its component, and this bottom part as its component as well. And maybe this part of the review as its component. So you can see all these different pieces are what we call components. So that's why React is component based, because we extract different part as a building block for the whole application into smaller pieces, which we call components. Okay, so there's a lot that I threw at you here, but I hope you are understanding or wrapping your head around about what is React. But most importantly, you have to think about why was React, quote unquote, invented? Why was it created? What problem is it solving? We know that React is good at rendering components on UI, in this case a web page, which is based on state changes, which is data. And also number two, it's good at keeping data and UI in sync. You will hear me talk about it, about this component here of data and UI in sync many times as we go through this course. But that is the core part of React. Okay, data, UI, and sync. So the idea is very simple. If some part of the data, in this case the state, changes, we're not going to re-render the entire page. We're only going to re-render only what needs to be re-rendered. And that is huge for efficiency. And that's why React is so popular and is one of the best tools to use to create modern web applications. So now it's time for us to set up our development environment. So particularly, we're going to be installing Visual Studio Code, which is a text code editor that we're going to be using in this course. If you already have that, of course, you don't have to do that again. For those of you who've never used or never installed Visual Studio, then I'll show you how to do that. And also, we're going to use Google Chrome browser. Majority of the world uses Google Chrome browser, but I just want to emphasize this. Make sure that in case that you don't use Google Chrome, then you will need to install Google Chrome browser, because that is the best browser for testing our applications. And of course, we need to install Node.js for dependencies and all the things that we need to have on our machine so we are able to create React applications. Okay, let's get started. So if you go to Google and look for VS Code as such, you should probably see this first link here that says Visual Studio Code. So let's click on it, and then you should be taken to this page as you see here. So this is where you can install Visual Studio Code. Again, Visual Studio Code is a lightweight code editor that is very popular. If you've never heard of it, I really encourage you to install it and use it. That's what we're going to be doing in this course. So I encourage you to do so as well. Okay, so you can see because I'm on Mac, this shows Mac here, but if you click there, you're able to go and get, for instance, the Windows 64 user stable, and just go ahead and click here to download the code editor. Okay, it's very simple, very light, and once that is downloaded, you should be good. So the next thing you need to do is to actually download Google Chrome. So let's download Google Chrome. Again, you probably already have Google Chrome, but just in case you don't have, make sure to download it so that you are able to follow along in this course. Okay, so go ahead and download and install here. And if you're on Windows or Mac and so forth, just follow along depending on where you are. So for Windows, click here, It says download installer and follow the instructions. If you're on Mac, click here, go ahead and download and follow the instructions. Linux, of course, go ahead and do that. Okay. And of course, this shows here the system requirements to use Chrome, Windows, Mac, and Linux. So just go ahead and do that if you don't have Chrome already installed on your machine. All right, the next thing we need to do is to install Node.js. I'm going to say install Node.js as such. There we go. So as of recording of this video, Node.js, this is the version. So don't worry too much about the versioning, because it all depends on when you're watching this video, of course. So maybe by the time you're watching this video, it's going to be version 120. I hope not, but you never know. So just focus on the tools at hand. So let's go ahead and click on download.js. In this case, you can change here what you want. So just take the one that is pre-populated. I think it's always the best policy. And version of Node.js for Mac. If you're on Mac, if you're on Windows, of course, click here and change to Windows. Okay. And you can change whether it's ARM64 and so forth. Okay. And go ahead and download. And that's it. Once you download, of course, if you're on Windows or Mac, you have to go through the process of installing it. So just follow the process. It should be fairly easy and to the point, and should be good to go. Now, once everything is done, you're going to open your terminal. I'm going to open my terminal here. Should be able to open your terminal and type something like this, node-v, and enter, and you should get the version of Node.js there. So I have version 21. In your case, could be a higher number. Doesn't matter, as long as you see something like this happening, then you are ready to go. Okay, so once you have installed the Visual Studio Code, VS Code, this is what you should see right away when you open it. Now, because I've installed some other things in my Visual Studio Code, yours is probably going to look a different color, but that doesn't matter. The essence of Visual Studio Code should be essentially the same. The beauty of Visual Studio Code is that you can actually attach what we call extensions to it to facilitate our development process, which is really neat. So essentially, these are small plugins we can attach to our editor, so that way we can be more productive. Now, there are a few tools, in this case extensions, we need to install if you don't have them. The first one is the Prettier, which is a code formatter. So to get a new extension, there are a few ways to get to that. First of all, you can click here and you can go to extensions, or you can see here, we can hit the Shift Command X to get extension. Okay, but I'm just going to click and voila. So this is the extension marketplace that you can go ahead and look for extensions. The first one we need to get here, as I said, is Prettier. So say Prettier, and you can see this is the code formatter Prettier. If you click here, you can see that I already have that installed, but in your case, go ahead and install Prettier. Okay, so once you have Prettier installed, you need to set it up so it actually is recognized by VS Code to use it to format your code. To do so, it's very simple. You're going to go to settings here, and we're going to go to settings, and then say default formatter. You're going to have to finish the whole thing. You can see that default formatter. Make sure that you click here and find Prettier. Okay, so click on Prettier. That should be it for that. And the next thing we'll do while we're here, we're going to go and look at format on save. So say format on save. This will allow for you to set up so that when you save the file, then the formatting kicks off so that the code is formatted. So format on save, you can just go ahead and enable it by clicking there. So format file on save. A formatter must be available for that to happen and so forth. So that's good. Make sure that is ticked as such. The next one we'll need here, it's not necessary, but it is indeed the theme that I'm using. So the theme that I'm using here, if you want to have this same look as you see here, you can go ahead and install different themes for your Visual Studio Code. So the theme I'm using, it's called Oh Lucy like this. So if you click, this is the theme that I'm using. So if you're interested, of course, you can go ahead and download so that everything looks the same as mine. So you don't have to, but that's just an option. And the way you would, after you install, the way you would change themes, you click here again, and you can say themes. Oh, you can't quite see. Let me make this perhaps a little bit smaller so you're able to see. So you go to settings here and go to themes. You can see, say color theme or file icon theme. and so forth. So if you click on color theme, then you can choose. In this case, I'm all Lucy and I have other themes that I can get to. Okay, so that is the fastest and simplest way to get to changing the theme. The other extension I will encourage you to install is ES7 as such. So go ahead and ES7 this one here, plus React, Redux, and so forth. Go ahead and install this extension because it's going to help with a lot of things, especially once you go more advanced with React. Code snippets and make our development way easier. Okay, so go ahead and install that as well. So the other thing we need to do here, let's click on settings again. Let's go to settings and I'm going to search the auto save. Just going to scroll down. You can see here it says files auto save. So what I like to do is you can actually change how the unsaved changes are triggered. So if I click here, you can turn it off, or you can say after a certain kind of delay, do you want it to save the file? So an editor with changes is automatically saved after the configured files auto saved delay. Okay, so these are different choices on focus change. I liked the after delay, so click that. That's what it's going to be set as. But also you want to tick this refactoring on auto save, which controls if files that were part of a refactoring are saved automatically. Okay, so those are the two main settings that you should get set up. And there you have it. Okay, so let's open Google Chrome or your browser. And how can we create a React project? So if I go ahead here and say create a React project, and you will see the first thing that you see here is that we go to the React website, right? If you click here, actually, let's go to the second one. I think this is the best because that is the most recent one, and create a React app. If you click here, you can see that this is actually the place where you should go to learn more about React. Okay, there's a lot of things here. Let me make this a little bit larger. Set up modern web app by running one command. And we have all these things. So it says here, npx, create React app, and so forth. So this is actually one way of creating a React app. But I'm going to show you another way. So I'm going to say get started here so I can show you exactly what this entails if you were to come here. It tells you exactly you can use npx, create React app, and add a name and cd to that directory and start running and everything is good. Okay. Now this is a valid way of creating a React app. It gives you all the tools, the tooling that you need to get started. But what we're going to do actually, it's something different. We're actually going to use a different React app creator per se that will allow us to create a React app with a little bit more. So let's go back here. Let's say react.dev. See if we can come up. There we go. So this is the actual React website where you can, again, learn more about React and so forth. We can go ahead and say learn React, click, and it tells you exactly what you will learn and takes you through the process of all of that. So that is not what we want. What we want is, I'm going to show you, let's click there and click on installation. So I'm going to click here and it says React has been designed from the start for gradual adoption. And you can read more about everything and so forth. And so let's go ahead and click on the how to start a new project. So I'm going to click here. Okay, so if you want to build a new app or a new website fully with React, we recommend picking one of the React-powered frameworks popular in the community. So what's happening right now is that they were forcing people to get an actual framework in order to create React-powered application, which for me, I think it's not necessary, especially if you just want to focus on the React side of things. What they mean by frameworks, there are so many different frameworks we can use that actually goes together with React, such as Next.js, Mix, and so many others. And that's what they're saying, that you need to get one of those frameworks to actually create React projects. Okay, which it's okay, but that's not what I'm going to do. And here you can see it says, can I use React without a framework? Show details. It says here you can definitely use React without a framework. That's how you would use React for a part of your page. However, if you're building a new app or a site fully with React, we recommend using a framework, which is true. But that's not what we want really to do. So I don't know why they're forcing people to do this. If you scroll down, you can see they give you the production grade React frameworks. As I said, Next.js, which has all these different things such as page routers and all the more granular things, toolbox essentially. That's what a framework is. That allows you to build really, really big applications, which is true, okay? And we can also use Remix, which is a full stack React framework with nested routing and Gatsby and so forth. Expo as well. So why am I saying this to you? Now, don't worry too much. You don't have to memorize anything. I'm just going to give you options how to create purely React application instead of attaching yourself to a framework, which is also important, obviously. But in this course, we're going to focus on the React side of things. We're going to actually use a Vite, which is a tool that aims to provide a faster and leaner development experience for modern web applications. Okay, so let's go ahead and just type Vite, V-I-T-E, like this. You can see here, next generation front-end tooling. All right, get started. Let's click here. It tells you what is Vite. It's a French word for quick and all that great stuff. So, but the great thing here is that with Vite, all of the creation of an application, in this case a project, a React project, is set up without us having to do much. Okay, so it abstracts out even further and also gives us more of that flexibility that developers always need, because it has a build command that bundles everything together. It has a dev server that provides rich feature enhancements and all the great things. So that's what we're going to use to create our React projects. So if I keep scrolling down here, you can see that compatibility Vite requires Node version 18 plus, 20 plus, which you should have no problem. And of course, we can use a package manager here that we prefer, but in this case, we're just going to use npm. So essentially, we can just take this or copy this and open a terminal. Once you are in your terminal, go to, in this case, I'm going to my desktop and I have a folder called React Sandbox, and I'm going to paste in this npm create Vite latest. So latest at latest means the latest version of Vite. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and hit enter. Okay, so once you do that, it's going to ask for the project name. The project name, I'm just going to say world like this. Hit enter. And now we're going to select a framework that we want to use. So the framework we're going to be using here, you can use the arrow up and down to select. So we want, yes, React. Okay, hit enter and select a variant. So these are these different variants of, in this case, the language that we can use to create our project, to base our projects on. So in this case, we're just going to go to JavaScript. Okay, and there we go. And so now what do we need to do? It tells us what to do. We're going to cd to hello world, hit enter, and then npm install, which is going to install all the dependencies that are needed for our Vite project to run. Okay, so I'm going to say npm install, hit enter, and this may take a few moments. Okay, after a few moments, you should see that everything is good. And next, I'm going to say npm run dev. So, and run dev, which will run a server where we can go ahead and look at our app. So you can see here, say HTTP localhost 5173. So that is indeed what we have. So I can say command click to open. There we go. So now you can see we have our application running. It says Vite plus React, keep counting, and voila. Very good. So now our project is running. This is a React project that has some functionality, which we're going to go into this project in the next video. So make sure that you're able to run your React project through Vite, and I'll see you next. I have our Vite plus React project running. What you see here is running because we ran this through our command line or terminal, and all is good. So what I'm going to do, actually, I'm going to say Control-C to kill this server. Okay, and next, what I'm going to do here, I'm actually wanting to open, if I say ls, for instance, to see the list of things that we have here inside of this directory, this project hello world, we see we have a lot of things here, but we want to be able to open this in VS Code, and then space, and then period. This will go ahead and open this current directory in VS Code. If I say enter, you can see that now I have this hello world, which is our project, with all these folders and directories, with all these different files and things that we perhaps never seen before. And that's totally fine, but at least we know that this is now here, right? So the beauty of VS Code is that it also has included its native command line or terminal. To open that, you can go to, at the top, you can quite see, say terminal, and say new terminal, and the terminal opens. Or, I love shortcuts. You can just say Control back tilde, and like this, it's going to open and close as such. Okay. Or you can click here to open and close as well. So there we go. So now we have this terminal, which is essentially the same terminal native to your computer, but it is embedded in VS Code. So it's very, very, very handy, as you see here. And let's take a quick look at some of these folders, the directories, and some of these files. Now, we don't have to go through all of them in depth, but it just give you some ideas. The beauty here is that because we use Vite, Vite has this vite.config.js, which allows the entire configuration for your project. Essentially, you don't ever have to come here to do really anything. Okay, so we have README, we have the package.json. This is where all of the scripts and all the dependencies that we add to our project or that come with our project when we first initialize, this is where everything is actually added. So these dependencies are set. So whenever we want to deploy or we want to restart this whole project, all the dependencies are set up, okay, correctly. And then we have this index.html. This is where the markup is for our entire project. You see here it says Vite plus React. So this is the title of this page. If you go, it says Vite plus React there. Okay, so if I change this to say something like that, save that, come here, you can see now it just says Vite. And the other thing you notice is that the beauty of Vite is that it has this auto reload. So anytime we make changes in our project here, they are reloaded automatically to be shown here, which is really handy when we're developing things. Okay, so then we have this source folder here directory. The source folder, we have assets. So this is where we put assets such as images, SVG files, and so forth. And then inside here we have this app CSS. So if you click, this is what comes with Vite. This is the app CSS file that comes with Vite with some stylings and so forth. This is the app JSX, which allows us then to create the actual, as you can see here. So this is the function.app, which indeed is the component that is showing most of what you see here, right? Even the clicking and so forth. So we're going to go through all of that, no worries, but I'm just going to give you a little rundown, okay? So you can see we have the button, count is, so that would be this button here. So that means here, if I change a few things, instead of edit, say hello world, save that, you can see that now it should say hello world here. Very good. So that's exactly what we have here. We have index CSS, of course, some more CSS files, JSX, which we will look into details. Okay, so this is the file that, as you can see, we're calling this component, which is our app JSX here. All right, no worries, we're going to get into all of that, into more details. But there we go. So we're able then to create, in this case, our project, our React project, with all of these different things that are shown here. Of course, if you come back here in our app JSX, if you remove or edit a few things, so let's say I want to remove these logos, I can just get rid of all of that. If I save this, you can see no longer have those two logos. Very good. So you can change this to, again, nothing. And save. You can see that now says nothing. You can remove certain parts of the markup, which is not the normal markup, as we will learn. Okay, it's JSX. All right, there we go. So I can also get rid of this and save, and voila. Right, so there we go. Make sure that you're able to create a project, a React project using Vite, and you're able to run it and see, well, not this because I've been removing things, but seeing something showing here. So now let's go ahead and start understanding React building blocks. So we have a full overview and understanding of React essentially. So we've talked a little bit about components in React. So components are very important, as we'll see, because they are the building block of React. When we talk about components, we're talking about JSX, we're talking about props, we're talking about state data, as we saw before. Talking about hooks and so many things. Now, I do realize that some of these make no sense right now. Don't worry, that's exactly why we are doing this. That's why we're here, is to demystify all of these pieces that come together to make out what React is. Okay, so let's start with understanding what a component is. So we saw earlier that a React component is a piece of user interface that will include, in this case, data, as well as logic and the appearance. So it's responsible for these three main things: the data, the state, the logic, and as well as the appearance, how it looks for the user interface, for the user, right, the client. So that is the essence of what a component really does. Now let's go back to code so I can show you a simple component and we can go from there. Okay, let's go back to our project, and in our app.jsx, so make sure you go to app.jsx here. Let's go ahead and delete a few things here so we can start from afresh. Delete that, and I'm going to also go ahead and delete all of this. So just click there and this, delete. Okay, here I'm just going to put a P. So if you see just P, hit enter, it's going to have a paragraph tag here. Say hello world as such. So I'm going to save this, and you should see that now it just says hello world. I'm going to get rid of that as well. So I don't need any of that. This function app here, this is actually a component. It so happens that it is the entry point component. The beauty of React is that we can create components which then we can call inside of this app to show them. Let me show you. I'm going to create a function here. So to create a component, you say function, because it is just a function, but it's treated differently in the backend. And let's just say hello world. Now let's look at the naming, which is very important. So we use the uppercase for the initial letter for each word that we add in our name. So hello world as such. That's how you should create your components, or name your components. So now this has to return something. So every component has to return the actual user interface that we want to show. So I'm going to put parentheses, and then here I can put a P for a paragraph. So P, and say hello world. Now, as you can see now, this is actually not bright. The color is kind of like dimmed down, which means it hasn't been called. And the other thing also, you can hover over, you can see that this is actually a special function, because it says a function hello world returns is of type, colon means of type, react.jsx element. We'll look into that. So now what I can do here in our app, the main entry point, I can get rid of this altogether, and I'm just going to return, in this case, a div as such. And inside of this div, I'm going to call this hello world as a component. Okay, so how do I do that? Well, to call a component, or in this case, you just say Angular bracket like this and say hello world. I'm going to hit enter because that shows there. And don't forget to have this self-closing tag as such. You can see now this hello world is brightened up. So if I save this, you can see that we still see hello world. There we go. So you created your very first React component, albeit very, very simple, but it is indeed working. So if I come back here to my component and say Hannah, something like this, and save, you can see hello world Hannah is showing here. Again, if I hover over, you can see that this is not a normal function per se, because you can see here it is of type React.jsx element. So we need to understand what's really happening here. Even though if you hover over this P tag here, which should be a HTML tag really, but it's not, which means it's being rendered as something else. This is actually JSX object, as you see here if you hover over. Okay, so let's study a little bit of what is JSX and understand exactly what's happening. So what is JSX? Well, JSX allows us to construct our components in React, as I've shown you. So essentially what we created earlier was this function hello world, which essentially is actually compiled into a JSX. We use JSX, which is JavaScript XML really, to write HTML-like. So it's not HTML, looks like HTML, to write HTML-like code inside of our JavaScript. While it appears to be a template language, it comes with the full power of JavaScript. So JSX gets compiled actually internally into regular JavaScript at runtime. This compilation is actually generally done by Babel, which is a JavaScript compiler that converts different types, I would say, of JavaScript, including JSX, into backwards compatible version of JavaScript. So every component, as you see here, must return a JSX block. So when we write something like this, const element is equal to h1 class name, greeting, and then pass hello world. It very much looks like, as we see here, HTML. But again, this is JavaScript XML, JSX, okay? So what happens here is that we're using JSX to allow us to describe what we want the user interface to look like by writing something like this, right? H1, passing the class name, which is greeting. In this case, this class name is going to be for CSS and so forth. And then pass hello world in this H1 tag. So in this line here, this element, which is all of this, is not a string or HTML. It's again JSX object that represents the DOM node. So when this line of code is run, JSX will become a call to React create element. So this is actually what's represented. So it's going to say React.create element, and it's going to create H1 tag as such, and pass in the object greeting as the class name, and then the actual contents, which is hello world. This is how things are presented internally in JavaScript object model. Now, the great thing here is that obviously we could use JavaScript and create our user interfaces with this syntax here. But as you can see, this is a little bit more complicated than this, right? Because it's easier just to say H1 class name, passing the class name for CSS purposes, and then passing in the contents for our H1, as opposed to writing our user interfaces using JavaScript straight like this. And React will read these objects and use them to construct and update the DOM. So in essence, JSX simplifies the process of building complex user interfaces by making the structure of the code correspond closely, in this case as you can see, to the layout it creates on the browser, all while keeping the power and flexibility of JavaScript. Now let's look at how React treats the DOM. Now remember that the DOM is simply a document object model. So essentially is the way the web page, or a web page I should say, is structured as an object for easy traversing and structuring. So we're able to get each node easily in code. So this is the DOM in simple ways. So if you look at the DOM to the left and to the right, we have JavaScript. So we are able to access nodes in the DOM. So in this case, nodes will be the elements. So we can say, for instance, I want to get the title, this element title here. I would say document.getElement by ID and pass in the title as the ID, okay? And then if we want to change, for instance, this title, the attribute, I can pass the style to say I want it to be red, the color. I can also go ahead and add a new element. For instance, I want to add the P element, in this case, the P tag, to the DOM. I can say document.create element. Again, you've seen this create element, and say P, which will create that element. We put that in a paragraph or a variable, and then we can add a text, that element. This is a new paragraph that's added, and then we can append this new P paragraph into our DOM, in this case, the body. That's what's happening here. So here we're just using the vanilla JavaScript to do what React does better. So let's look at a fuller overview how the actual DOM and how React actually creates its own version of the DOM to make things simpler. The actual DOM could look like this. We have the document, and then we have a div, another div, and then an H1 attached to the div to the right. What React does introduces a powerful approach to handling the DOM, in this case the document object model, which is central, of course, to its high performance and dynamic capabilities. So the key to React's efficiency, or efficient updates, I should say, to the web interface is its use of the virtual DOM. What is this? Well, here's a detailed look at how React interacts with the DOM. So if you look at the virtual DOM here, we still have the document, and we have, of course, this tree like. So we have div, another div, and H1. But the importance here is that with the virtual DOM, the DOM is indeed lightweight. So in this case, in-memory representation of the actual DOM. So it's not the real DOM. That's why it's a virtual. So React creates a virtual copy of the DOM tree, as we see here, which consists of React elements, the objects created from the JSX, in this case JavaScript XML. Now, this representation allows React to perform optimizations and make efficient updates to the DOM. So although they look the same, they are not. So React creates a copy of the real DOM and uses it, because it's lightweight, to make the changes necessary before pushing to the real DOM. So as we know that data or state is very important in the UI in React, that's the whole point, right? So when the state of a React component changes, let's say that this div is part of a component. When the state that is governing this component changes, React doesn't update the actual DOM. Instead, it updates this virtual DOM tree rather than immediately applying every changes that are coming to the actual DOM. So then what happens is that React batches these changes to maximize performance. So as the changes are happening with the data that's coming in the state, instead of each time that something happens, go ahead and update the real DOM, it just batches them to get all together. So if we have 1, 2, 3 things are happening, it holds off all into the virtual DOM and then batches them to the actual DOM. So this is actually reactive, which also makes it more efficient because now we're not constantly updating the actual DOM. So what really happens is that React compares the updated DOM tree with the previous snapshot of the virtual DOM. So each time something changes, it creates that previous state snapshot. And then next it goes to the next phase, which we call the reconciliation. So this is the place React identify nodes of this DOM, virtual DOM, that have changed, and only, this is important, only updates those specific nodes in the actual DOM. So imagine if this is the part where the changes have been made, right? The state has changed and the updating has happened. It's going to go ahead and update exactly that part only, not the entire DOM for efficiency. For instance, if only this text here, h1 element here, tag, in a DOM node changes, React updates only that part of the actual DOM, not the entire tree. So as you can see here, the beauty here is that now we end up with a very lightweight React virtual DOM because it's not loaded with all these changes that are happening. And so what happens is that we end up with a very lightweight virtual DOM, which is communicating with the actual DOM by only re-rendering what needs to be re-rendered instead of re-rendering everything, even though we just want to re-render one particular part of the DOM. So I'm going to show you exactly how this actually looks. So if you go to babel.js.io REPL like this, just Google babel.js.io. This is a website where you can see, remember Babel is the compiler that compiles the JSX into JavaScript. And go ahead and make sure that we have React set up like that. And so I paste in this const element and created this JSX. This is all JSX as we saw in the presentation. Make this a little bit larger. And you will see that on the right here, just on the right here, this is what's going to be compiled into the JavaScript. So as we saw, it's going to use React JSX runtime, and it's going to go ahead and create the element here, which then create this h1, which attaches then the object class name, which is going to be greeting, and children is going to be hello. So anytime that we have a JSX, it's going to be compiled into the actual JavaScript, as you see here. So if I were to create yet another element, say const name, say this is going to be a p like this, or I can create a div just so to show the difference here. And then inside of this div, I can go ahead and put a paragraph. My name is Paulo as such, and you can see exactly what happens. So it creates that, and we have a div which has children. In this case, it's going to be a p, a paragraph, and of course its own children is going to be the actual content, which is my name is Paulo. So this is JSX, and this is how Babel compiles it into JavaScript as such. It was just something to show you. Very well, so we were able to create our very first component. Hello world doesn't do much, but at least it's able to showcase the basics of creating a component, and of course inserting that component inside of our main component, which is our app. Now let's go ahead and do a little overview of the main files that we're going to be working with, at least the main files that are part of a React project. So we can actually open our Explorer here. You can click here to open, which is Command B to open, Command B to close. And let's look at some of the main files. So if we look at our main component, which is app here, this is what we are rendering, returns this JSX. As you know by now that every component has to return something. So this being a main component, app, see that it returns a div. We can return anything we want, but in this case, we're returning a div with the class name app. Now, where is this app coming from? Now, this class name here, notice if you know CSS and HTML, usually you just say class, right? In traditional HTML. Now, when we talk about components with JSX and React, we have to call class name as such and then add the app. This is the class name that we are invoking here. Let's look at the main JSX to see what's going on. So if you go to main JSX here, you can see that we have this react.create root that's being called, and then we pass document that get element by ID. So this is indeed JavaScript. In fact, if you have over, you can see it says var document is of a document type. Okay, so we're saying get element by ID and we're getting the root, and then we're going to call the render on that, where we then pass the app component, which is this component here. Okay, that's what's happening here. And of course, we are enclosing it with a different component that comes with React called strict mode. Okay, so if you have over, it says here, lets you find common bugs in your components early during development. So the thing here we'll look into, it's just a strict mode, as you said, it's good for development, and we will look into that more as we go through the course. But the most important here is that we are calling the React object and then say create root, and then we pass the root that we want to create, in this case, and render. So we're going to pull the root element by ID. Now, where is this from? So if we go to our main or index.html, you can see that we have indeed this markup. This is the whole markup that governs the entire application, the entire user interface. So what we're saying here is that we are getting, in this case, this div ID root. And inside of this div ID root, this is where we're going to render everything that we have here. But most importantly, everything that we were able to pull to create that root and say by ID root and render all of the app inside of our index.html, which is it's going to be added here. Okay, so this is kind of like a placeholder. Okay, so this is the index.html that governs everything. Okay, so that is the connection here. The ID root. If we go to main JSX, that's what we're doing. We're pulling that root, and then we call the render from our create root, and then we pass the actual app component. And as I said before, this app is indeed a component, and you can see that this is true because this is how it's called here. If I have over, you can see it's React JSX element, and that was imported, and all is good. So if I comment this out, if I can select everything, Command Shift and arrow left or right, selected, and Command // save, come here, you can see now it's empty. It tells us that indeed this is what's happening because we comment this out. So now in our root here, nothing is going to be rendered, which indeed it's going to be rendered here. So if I come here and say Control Z and remove that altogether and say hello world, that also should work. If I save, you will see that we see hello world. Okay, so that is the connection. Let's go put it back what we had before. So let's make this a little bit better. So I'm going to delete this. I'm going to create yet another component here. So this component is going to mimic a book display, right? To be able to show description of a book, title, and so forth. I'm going to create a new component. It's called function book. And so, as we know, every component has to return something. So I'm going to say return, and I'm going to return, in this case, just a simple div. So I'm going to say div, hit enter. Actually, let's say div again. Make sure to go to the Emmet abbreviation here, H2 book title, and I'm going to put a H3, and this will say by author, and then H4, or rather a paragraph, I'm going to put book description as such. There we go. So of course nothing is going to show because we need to actually remove this, and this is going to be book as such. And don't forget to have this self-closing component. The book title, by author, and book description. Now, what if we actually want to get those values from variables or from a data source? So we can put the actual book title and then the actual by author and a little bit of a book description. How would we do that? Well, there are different ways. Let's start small. So first of all, we could say at the top here that we could have a few variables. So I'm going to say const, say book name, and it's going to be, let's say, effective Java, for example. And const, we can also give the author as such and create another variable here, which is description. Great, book about Java. Okay, so we have the book name, the author, and the description. Now, the question is, how do we then, because remember, this is JSX, right? How do we then get these variables to actually show instead of having this text that we're adding here? Can we go and say, for instance, book name? What would happen? Let's go and save. Come here, you can see it doesn't work. It just says book name. Because what happened with JSX, it's going to read this as just a string when we put it like that. So how do we then interpolate, in a sense, get this as the variable? Because this is just a variable. We want to be able to get the contents of this variable, which is going to be effective Java, which is the title of the book. How do we do that? Well, the beauty here is that with JSX, we can actually change the modes here, meaning we want to, because this is all JavaScript, right? We can pass JavaScript inside of JSX. To do so, we have to put inside of curly braces. Whenever you do this, now we can put a JavaScript expression, variable, whatever that you want to put here. In fact, if I say, for instance, +1 + 1, if I save this, you can see it's going to say 2, because now we have a JavaScript that is going to be evaluated through this expression, 1 + 1, etc. Okay, so now I can pass the variable. So if I say book name, which is this here, and come here, you can see effective Java is showing. And of course, now if I want to get by author, so what I can do, I can just put something like that. So the by is just a text now, and then the author, I can pass the author variable, such, and the same thing for description. So I'm going to say book, just go ahead and put the whole description all together like that. And right now you can see we have Effective Java by Kathy Sierra, a great book about Java. So we're able to interpolate, we're able to pull in the variables that we created and get the contents and pass them inside of our JSX. Remember, all of this is JSX, even though it looks like HTML as we've looked into this. All of this is being returned is going to be JSX. So now to interpolate, to add JavaScript, pure JavaScript. In fact, if you hover over, you can see that book name, it is indeed this, right? Which is JavaScript. So we have to put inside of curly braces to say now we are getting into the JavaScript, pure JavaScript mode. So we can pull in those variables easily like that. Hey, so sorry to interrupt. I just want to say, if you're enjoying this mini course on React, I actually have a full course on React that you can dive deeper into React, understanding the power of React and how to really use React to build modern web applications. So check out the link in the description and okay, carry on. As you can see that this works fine because we're able to have our book component and we call it inside of our app main component here, and that is displayed as you see here. But one thing that we will learn as we go through this course is that each component has to be as lean and as compartmentalized as possible for reusability. So at this point here, if we wanted to use this book somewhere else on a different component or even a different application, if we wish to do so, then we would have to use as we are using right now here, call it like this. But you can see that there's not a lot of flexibility because we have the actual data, because let's just say we have the actual data which is attached to this book. So usually what I want to do is I'm going to just cut this, we want to call that data or have that data at the parent, at the level of the parent component, because this app is the parent component which has the book as its child. Now you notice that if we do this, then we'll lose something. So if you save this and come back here, you can see we see nothing. What is going on? Well, it turns out that because the book is, we're passing this book name, the author, and description, well, they're no longer here inside of our book component. So how do we then are we able to get this book name, author, and description variables, or data in this case, to be shown to be attached to our book component? Because we elevated, in this case, we put the actual data at the parent level, which is this app here. Somehow we need to figure out a way, there should be a way in which we can pass these parameters per se into our component. So the idea here is very simple. We want to be able to say, for instance, title, and give the title of, let's say, book name as such. To make sure that when we save, we want to be able to see that. Okay, this should be title like that. So for this to work, we need to change a few things. That means then, inside of our function, well, this component here, we need to pass the props. What that means is that props is actually an object that comes with all components that allows us to pass pieces of data, properties. That's where it comes from, props, properties. Okay, so how does that work? Well, first of all, let me do something here. So I'm going to take that props and let me remove this altogether, keep it as it is. And then what I will do is here, I'm going to say log to say console.log, or we can actually type the entire thing, console.log as such. And then what this will do will allow us to console in our browser, as you will see in a second here. First, I'm going to say hello, so you can see what I'm talking about. Say hello there. Okay, I'm going to save this. And next, I'm going to do our browser and right click and go to inspect. If you go to inspect, this is what's going to happen. Now, okay, this is a little bit too small, and I'm going to make this a bit larger so we're able to see. And let me move this to show at the bottom, so it's probably better that way, I hope. Let's go like that. And we have a lot of things going on here. So what's happening here is that we can actually see what's happening with our program that we're running with our React app and see what's being output. Now, there's a lot that we can do with our developer tools here in Chrome. But what I want you to do is to go to console. And there's a lot of gibberish that's happening here, but you can see that we have this hello there that's showing. Let me go ahead and click like that, and I'm going to refresh again and just ignore all of these issues. But you can see that we have this hello there twice. We'll talk about why this is saying hello there twice. Okay, so we know that hello there is being shown, which means exactly what's happening here. This console log is working. But now we're going to go ahead and console log these props here a little quick. So I'm going to go ahead and say props and come here. I'm going to clear that and let's go ahead and refresh. And voila. You can see that now we have this object, which is essentially empty, but it is indeed an object. It has a lot of properties which we are not interested in, but at least we know that we have indeed this object, which is already passed inside of any component. So we can take advantage of that and pass those props, in this case properties, which is pieces of data, variables essentially, parameters, what have you, which will allow us to pass data along to different components. And so going back to our code here is that now if I go to our book where we're calling it and say, for instance, title, and give it hello, for instance, I'm going to save this. If I come back here, look what's going to happen. First of all, let's go ahead and get rid of all of these for now. That way we don't have all those errors because these don't exist, okay? Let's come back here and voila, you can see we have title hello because we said that this book accepts props, and so it's reading whatever property that we're passing in this book here. So title, we said the prop title, field is title, and the value is hello. And that's why we're able to see this object that has title as the key, and the value is hello. So that means as many props that we can pass here, let's say description, if I say author and set it to something, James, what do you think is going to happen? Voila, if I save, you can see now this object is growing. Now it has the author. Actually, as we type, it keeps adding things, but let's look at the last one. We see title, hello, author is James. So there we go. Okay. This is very important because now, as you see, will allow us to do all sort of things, which is important to pass data, pieces of data through our components. Now we did this manually. That means we can now pass the actual dynamic data. So again, I'm going to put inside of curly braces and say I'm going to pass, in this case, the book name as such. And for the author, I'm going to do the same thing because remember, we need to get into the JavaScript mode by putting curly to say we're going to pass some variables, which is essentially actually JavaScript. So let's go ahead and get author and continue with description, which is going to be description as such. Now look what's going to happen. If I save this, you can see that we have the object. Look at this. We have the author. This is from props, right? You have the title, description, author. So you can also see as you see here. Very good. So this is very helpful because now we can have a more dynamic component, which will allow us to pass in properties through the prop, as you see here, the props object. So now that we have this props object, right, in our component, then here we can go ahead and pass that, right? So remember, now I can say props dot access a certain field. So what first field I want. Let's go back to our console here. We can go to get author. So props.author, that's going to give us the actual author, right? So author, and then I'm going to do the same thing by props. No, this should be title, right? Because this is the prop that we're passing here, which is title. Very good. And then props.author. And then description here, so say props description as such. Save that. I'm going to just close this and voila, you can see that indeed now we have the same thing we had before, but now we're passing data through props, the props object. And this is really awesome because notice that now this book, this component here, we can pass any type of props that we want and we can receive those and then display as we wish. This is very, very beautiful because now we can use this component anywhere we want, pass any kind of data that we want, and then as long as we are mapping the props, and we can pass all the props that we want, and then inside here, inside of the actual declaration of this component, we can then pull in those props as you see here. So this concept of props, we're going to see this time and time again as we go through this course. So this is an introduction, and what I want you to do now is try to add other props here inside of this book. Maybe you can add year or anything else that you want and see if you can also, because this object props, as you know, has all of the things that we're passing, and see if you can pull that information into a p tag or span tag or whichever to show at the bottom here of our description. Okay, just play around with this and I'll see you next. So we're able to, of course, pass properties, in this case props, through our component, and we're able to see that things are working. So we have effective Java, the by author, Kathy, Sarah, and description. All of that is being done manually, but imagine, as you know, that data comes in different formats and usually it's not a hard-coded data. So we're going to continue with hard-coded data, but we're going to go to a different level here to show what is possible. So let's imagine that instead of having these variables here, we actually have a source of data. Okay, let's say we have a list of books, or an array of books. So I'm going to say const and say books, and to make a list, we put square brackets as such, and then inside of the list, we're going to have objects of books. Now I already have all of that prepared. You will have access to all of these anyway. Okay, so I won't bore you with everything here. So let me go ahead. So now you can see we have this books list that contains objects. So each object, in this case it's a book, has an ID field, a title, as well as author, description, and so forth. Okay, and there we go. So now what we want to do is we want to be able to, first of all, go ahead and get this list or array of books, and then see if I can pull all that information through here, our book component, at least show the fields for one book. So what we're going to do here, as you know, because we have the title, prop, we have the author and description, we can go ahead and pull in. So now we have these books. It's an array or list. That means inside here, instead of book name, that's not going to work. I'm going to just say books, of course, and I'm going to access the first element of the index, which in this case is going to be the first element, I should say, of the list array, which is going to be this object here. Okay, so once I get to that object, then I can say dot, and I can either get description, ID, title, and so forth. Let's go ahead and get the title. Okay, there we go. I'll do the same thing, get this first, actually the first element, and then get the author property, and for description, do the same thing, and get description. Okay, if you save this, you can see everything was formatted now. It looks way nicer. If I go back here, you can see indeed it says 1984 by George Orwell and dystopian novel. And of course, I can come back here and change a few things. This is where the book component is being structured, right? The appearance and the logic and everything. So now I can actually say title like that. Notice I'm putting that outside of JavaScript, right, of the curly braces, and the by, just like we did before, is outside of the curly braces, which this is actually JavaScript. Okay, and I can say description just to signify the fields. Okay, there we go. So now title 1984 George Orwell, and then description is there. Okay, so that works great. But now you can see, of course, we have problems here. Not a problem, but we have some sort of inefficiency. Because at this point here, we are only able to get one book at a time. And we're still doing lots of hard coding here. We can say books and get the first element of this array and then get the title. Okay, so anytime we want to go back and get, for instance, the second book, because this is the book one, I want to go get the second book, this one here, then we have to go back here and say change to 1, and as you see, that is just not very good. But at least we know that this is working. We're able to get some data that is formatted the way most source of data will be formatted, which is in terms of a list and objects and so forth. So the way we have things set up right now, you can see that we are passing books and then say the list in this case array. We're accessing the first item by passing 0 and then get the title field. Okay, this is okay, but of course this is not the best way to do it. So of course you will think we need, of course, a way of looping through our data source, in this case our books, to get all of the objects and go from there. That's exactly what you want to do. So here's what we'll do. I'm going to go ahead and comment this out real quick there, and you can do that by selecting everything that you want to comment out. So shift and click here, and then command and /. So that will go ahead and comment things out. And you can see that it adds these curly braces here, because the idea is that we are commenting things out inside of the curly braces, which is the JavaScript part of things. Okay, so in JavaScript, there are a few ways for us to be able to loop through. I'm going to use the map method, which creates a new array populated with the results of calling a provided function on every element in the calling array. Okay, this is real good for transforming the data, and I'll show you. It's very simple. So what do we do here? Of course, I'm going to put inside, because it's going to be a JavaScript piece of code, I'm going to put inside of curly braces. And we know that the data source here is our books. That is the list, the array in JavaScript, right? So now what we do here is we go and get the books, which is the list, the array. So we say books, okay? And then I say dot, and you can see we have push, map for each length, and so forth. These are methods that we can call. We want the map, okay? the map method or function. So this will allow us to literally transform each one of these elements from our array here of books into another form of data. In this case, it's going to be into a React component, as you will see. The map will take two parameters. If you hover over, you can see it takes two parameters. The first parameter is just the value, which in this case is going to be the object, each one of the object for our book. That's why you can see here we have ID, title, author, description. So this is indeed an object. As you can see, we have curly braces and we end with curly braces. Okay, that's number one. The next one that we can, if you wanted to add, is the index. Okay, the index is a number type, which then is going to control the index for each one of the items that we're looping through. So in this case here, I'm going to pass both of them. So I'm going to say, you can name whatever you want. The first parameter, I'm going to say book. Okay, because it's going to be each one of the book's object inside of the list or array. And then I'm going to say index as such. Okay, because we're transforming here these books into something else. So we have the book object and we have the index. That means we're transforming into something. We're going to use the arrow function to say, go ahead and return something here. So what we want to return actually is going to be a JSX code. So we're going to put that inside of parentheses like that. To say that inside here, I can just go ahead and say, I have the book object. I can say book dot. You can see I can get ID, title, and so forth. So let's say title. So save this. Look what's going to happen. If you come here, you can see that it goes ahead and gets the first book and the second book. So this is working because now we can see we are inside of this loop. Okay, we're mapping, we are transforming all of the elements inside of our books array and map them into an actual component, or in this case, JSX code here. All right, that's powerful. And I can show you also, I can put other things here. If I want, I can say index outside there, index, and then pass the index. I save. You can see now for each one of them is going to give us the index 0 because that is the first book in our list, and index 1, this is the second book on our list. If we had multiple, then of course we'll see all of them. Okay, so this is real good, but this is not what we want. We want to be able to actually take this back, the actual component, and pass it along here. So I'm going to get rid of that, and as well as get rid of that. And I'm going to just go ahead and copy all of this that we had before, or just cut all of that and put inside here. And right now, let's just delete that because we no longer need that. So this is what's happening now. Of course, this is not going to work because we don't need to go through books like that. So now we can just use the object. So I'm going to say copy. Oh, I can just like remove all of that. That's easier, I guess. Just use the actual object, book description like this. And if I save this, you'll see that voila, now we have the title and the name, the author and description. And then we have again the title for the second book, the author and the description. It doesn't matter how large this list of books is, we're always going to be able to loop through them, to map them and get the title, author, description for each one of this book object. Okay, so if you have 100 books in our list or array, then that shall happen. So this is working perfectly. If we go to our web browser here, you can see that the books are showing. But one thing you will see, if I right click anywhere here and go to inspect, and what we'll do now is, let me go ahead and show you. I'm going to make this a little bit larger perhaps. And you can see that we have all of these tags that were added. Okay, we know all of that. You can scroll over and you can see as you go through all of these, they are actually highlighted here. But what I want to show you here, if you go back here, you should be able to see this because I am zoomed in. I have to click this button to go to console. Go to console. Okay. Now you can see that we have this warning here that says, perhaps a little bit larger. Let me put this below perhaps. You will see that every time I'm going to go ahead and clear it out and refresh. You can see every time we have this warning that says each child in a list should have a unique key prop. So the reason why each child in a list should have a unique key prop is because in React, the key prop is used to help identify which items have changed or which items were added or removed from the tree, which is very important for performance during re-renderings when working with lists of elements and so forth. So this goes back to the efficiency that React has to have, which allows React to make sure that not to re-render things unnecessarily. So keys internally are used for that. That's the reason why it always gives us a warning, even though things work, but it gives us a warning for us to pay attention to. Now, how do we solve this issue? Well, there are different ways to solve this. We can see that when we go back to our map or loop, per se, where we're mapping things around, this is being created where? Well, this is being created here in our component. So we're returning a div, which then we have h1 or h2, h3, and so forth, description, author, and title. So we want to attach to this div here that's created, in this case, part of this entire component, the actual key. And the way you do it, in this case, is very simple. So I'm going to put at the top here, I'm going to say I want a key. And the key prop is going to be, so I can go ahead and say index. This would work. And I'll show you a better way here. So I'm going to save this. And if you come here, I'm going to go ahead and refresh. And you can see we no longer have issues, right? Everything is fine, because now each one of these elements that is being created, we won't see here, but internally React has attached for each one of these divs now, because this div here, this is one component, this is the second component, which we're using the same component, but it is multiplied by 2 because we are looping, right, going through the map and so forth. So that's what's happening. So now React will know that, okay, whenever I need to change something or something changed in this div here, which is the component that contains all of this information here, then it will know that, okay, that is the key, that only that will be rendered. Okay, we won't see here, but that's how it works. So each time we're looping through, we're going to go ahead and pass the key prop inside of each one of these components, which we pass, in this case, just the index. Now, this works because each index, as we know, is going to be very unique. As you remember, it has to be very unique because these are identifiers for React. This is okay, but the better way would be, because most data, when it comes in with IDs. So we have the ID fields for each one of these books. So we can actually use it. And to do so, how do we do? Well, we just go and say book.id, right? So we can say book.id as such. You will see no difference whatsoever. And I can refresh. You can see we no longer have that warning. Okay, so this is just a way for you to understand the things that are required in a way to continue to make sure that our code is safe, to make sure that our code is congruent with the way React works. Now let's imagine that we want to change something about our props. Okay, so we go to our component, book component here, and we know we're receiving the props, which we're distributing all along to be returned here in these JSX to be shown around here in our page. And there are times we want to change the props. So I could say, for instance, props dot, and I want to change the title. In this case, I'm going to say hello world. I'm going to save this and let's see what's going to happen. If I come here, looks like, doesn't matter how many times I refresh, nothing is showing. What's going on? Well, let's go ahead and right click and open inspect and hopefully see if something is wrong. Let's go to console. And once you do that, you can see that there's a lot of things that have been happening here. Let me make it a little bit larger so you can see. It looks like we have some issues. It says uncaught type error cannot assign to read-only property title. And it even gives us the app.jsx36. So essentially, it's saying at this line here, this is illegal. We cannot do this. So this takes us to a very important concept in React when it comes to props. Let's take a look. So we know that props are very important because they allow us to pass data through components. And later we learn that we can also pass other types of data through props. Okay, but now we know that we just think of data as a list of books or variables or different variables and so forth, right? So that is the main thing about props. So we're able to have, for instance, the app component, which is what we call a parent component. And then we have the book, which in this case is the child component. So the idea is we put the data, in this case, the book list, at the top level of the parent component. And then that was dripped down or passed around through props, in this case, to the book component, the child component. So we have the parent component and the child components. So that is the dynamic you always have to think about when we talk about props. But there are some things that we need to learn about props that actually we just learned in a few seconds ago, that props are immutable, meaning the components can't actually change that prop, as you saw. The idea is very simple. We know that props allows us to pass data through components, right? So we've seen this just now. You pass all that information in. But the thing about this whole thing here is that there is what we call a flow of data. So the flow of data goes one way, right? The data flow goes one way, goes from the parent down to the child. And so the immutability of the props, meaning they can only be changed by the parent component and not by the child component, and also the one-way data flow that is innate to React. These two particularities of immutability as well as the one-way data flow in React, this is designed this way for very important reasons. So if we look again, go back to a component, we know that a component is loaded with a few things. So we know that a component has data. It also has logic as well as appearance. So that is what a component encapsulates. But within this data, we have props, as we've seen, ways in which we can pass data through our components. But one thing we haven't talked about is that data, when we talk about data, it's not just props. It also has what we call state, which we'll talk about more in the upcoming lessons. And of course, inside of data, instead of props and state, we have other things that we can pass. Okay. Props really are passed down from the parent component down to the child components. Therefore, these can only be changed by, in this case, changed means mutated, to change the state, right? These can be changed by the parent and not the children. So this means that props are immutable in React, meaning they are read-only. They can only be read by the children. The only way to change props is through state, which we'll talk about later. So keep in mind, again, the state is internal data that can be updated by the component's logic, in this case, the mutable state. We'll talk about state, do not worry, but just know that data, when we talk about data as part of what a component has, it has props, state, and many other types of data, which we'll talk about later. Now, the question here is, okay, why is it so important that we have this one-way data flow from top, the parent, down to the children, and also props are immutable? Why is that even important? Why is that designed that way? There are a few reasons. In React, immutability and unidirectional data flow, so from top to bottom, are two fundamental concepts that significantly influence how applications are structured and behave. That means that both of these principles work together to provide a very predictable and efficient way to manage and render the UI. Keep in mind, as we've talked about, the whole reason why React is what it is because of data and the UI. These two components have to sync together. So why is immutability when it comes to props very important? Well, there are a few reasons why. Number one is because if we make immutability in props, we'll simplify complex features. Okay? Imagine that we have an application that allows users to undo, redo a certain functionality. That means then there are a lot of changes, complex changes in the state that have to be accounted for. When we make the props as part of the data structure, in this case here, immutable, we are making this state history that is needed in this case easier to implement, because each state is very distinct snapshot that can be navigated through without unintended side effects. And number two, there is the optimization and performance we talked about, because React uses the reconciliation algorithm we talked about before, which we don't have to go into too much details. The idea is that, as we said, it has a copy of the real DOM, so it has a virtual DOM, which allows it to be more specific and more efficient when it comes to re-rendering certain components of the user interface, as opposed to constantly re-rendering the entire DOM for minor changes. And the third part about immutability in props is that it will prevent bugs, because mutating objects and arrays directly can lead to really obscure bugs, especially in large applications where data changes are unpredictable. So immutability enforces a more predictable flow of data where changes are deliberate and explicit. So now we're going to look at this part here of one-way data flow. Why is it important to have this one-way data flow? Well, it makes sense because now we have a more predictable way in which the data is flowing. So by enforcing a single direction for data flow, React makes sure that the behavior of an application is more predictable and understandable. Because if the data could just go up and down, such as in different other frameworks or libraries, it requires a little bit more work for the developer to be able to notice or to be aware of that directionality of the data. And so React says, okay, just make it unidirectional and we're done because it's more predictable. And also we have easier state management because managing state is simpler because it's contained and manipulated in specific parts of the component tree, right? So components in this case will receive data through props and manage their own private state if necessary. And of course, it's less prone to errors because with data flowing in one direction, components have less potential to inadvertently affect each other, which in this case will reduce the likelihood of cascading errors throughout the entire application. Okay, there was a lot of talk here, but I just want you to keep this in mind. And as we go through this course, of course, I will remind you of the reasons why we do certain things. But specifically, I wanted to show you why things are the way they were designed in React, which is props immutability as well as one-way data flow. Now let's go ahead and look at this concept called destructuring props. So the idea is very simple. We know that props is an object properties that allows us to pack in some properties as parameters. So we should have name, age, and so forth. So what we're going to do is now going to be able to destructure this property, this object, into different pieces. That way it's easier for us to get to all of those, right? So let me show you how to do that. And you will see how simple and important this is to make it a little bit easier to code and so forth. Let's go ahead and take a look. Okay, so let's see how to destructure these props here. So the idea is very simple, is that as we pass, you can see we pass this props object. We know this is an object. And then to get to the actual field, the pieces of data, we have to say props dot title. This is going to be the field that we're getting. And then author, description, and so forth. So now we can do something really simple, which allows us to not have to go all the way from props to get the field. We destruct that props. So essentially we put inside of curly braces as such, and then we can say title, and then we say author, comma, and we say description as such. So what this will do is that it's going to take that props and destruct it into the smaller pieces of the actual fields, which are the data that we want. So that now we no longer have to say props that title. We can just remove that, and we're going to just get that title and remove that, get the author, as well as removing that to get the description. So if you save this, you will see that we still have the same thing working, but now it's way more beautiful and easier to comprehend what is that we're passing. So now essentially we're passing this essentially as a parameter and arguments and so forth. So it's easier for us to know what pieces of data that we have access to. So there we go. This is destructuring props. So as a challenge, I would like you to create a user profile card that will look like this. So the idea is to use all the things that you've learned, how to create a component and everything, and create something like this. You should have all the tools you need to get this going. Now you'll notice that we have some styling here. Now you don't worry about that, because if you download the code, the project code that you should have access to, you will see that I've added this user profile class here in app.css that essentially creates this nice card there. Okay, this nice border. So, but the idea is not to worry too much about all of the styling and everything, because we'll get into that later. But the idea is that I want you to put into practice what you've learned about creating component and show it on the browser like this. Okay, so it has to have name of the person, the email field, as well as the bio. Now, the actual data doesn't matter as long as you have the structure set up. Okay, so I really encourage you to spend as long as you need to get this done. It's not, again, doesn't matter how it looks. What it matters is that you're able to create something like this using all the things that we've learned so far about React. Okay, so please do not go and peek at my solution, and make sure that you try yourself first before you peek at my solution. Okay, that's very important because that's how you actually learn. Okay, here's my solution. I hope you were able to get something to work, but in any case, here it is. It's very simple. So below our book component here, I'm going to create a new component. It's going to be user profile as such, and I'm going to make sure to return something. In this case, I'm going to return a div, okay, like this. All right, so inside of this div, I'm going to first have an h1 tag, and then inside here, I'm going to pass JavaScript here, which is going to be a prop, and it's going to be name. Now, because I know that name is not going to be possible to see, I'm actually going to destructure the prop. You remember? Put inside of curly braces. I'm going to say name, email, and bio. So those are the pieces of data that I need. So first I'm going to pull in the name, and then I'm going to add a p tag here that will say email, and then I'm going to pass in curly braces to say now we're entering the JavaScript mode, and I'm going to pass the email. And then last but not least, another p tag, paragraph, and I'm going to say bio, and it's going to be bio as such. Okay, so now the other thing we need to do is we need to pass a class name here. I know we haven't really talked much about it, but here it is. And as I said before, you should have access to this user profile that I added into app CSS. Okay, so we're going to call this class style here and pass it there. That way we have that very nice thing showing. Okay, now that we have our user profile component, just like anything, just like the book, we can go ahead and call it. So what I can do, I'm going to go ahead and comment this out, the book component, and still inside of our, remember this is inside of our app, the entry point component, and I'm going to say user profile, close, self-closing, right? This is our component, and we know that we need to pass, if I hover over, we're going to pass the name, email, and bio, because those are the props that are needed. So let's say name, and I'm going just to add something like John Doe, say, right? So straight adding them as strings like that, and then I'm going to add email, fake one, and last but not least, it's going to be the bio property, say React dev at tech co, like that. Okay, if you save, then of course you're going to format everything, and we should have everything set up. If we go back here, and voila, you can see we have our nice card. All right, so I hope you were able to get that to work. Well, congratulations. Okay, so this is the end. I hope this mini course allowed you to learn about React, understand the basics of React, and what React is solving, what problem is React solving when it comes to building web applications. And also would like to remind you that I do have a full course on React, and I keep adding more things into that course. So if you're interested in learning more about React, so actually deep diving into React, check out the link in the description, and I would love to have you in the course. Thank you so much, and I'll see you next time.